Reading was probably the single most important thing I did when I was starting out on my entrepreneurial journey and my journey on transforming myself into who I am today. Reading truly changed my life and it can change yours too. If you don't know who I am, my name is Carter Positan. I'm a 21-year-old entrepreneur who has grown and scaled multiple six-figure businesses in just the last 3 years alone since I was 18. And I am here on YouTube to be the person that I needed when I was 18. And more importantly, the person that I needed yesterday or the person that I needed last month or last year. I constantly strive to be the mentor that I've never had. And I put these videos on YouTube to be that person for somebody else that might be in the position I was in on this solo journey on their own. And what I want to talk to people today about is reading books and the importance of it, because when I started my entrepreneurial journey at 18, when I was just coming out of a serious addiction, I kind of had this butterfly effect that led me to pick up the book Discipline is Destiny by Ryan Holiday. And this book is, now reading it, is a little bit dumbed down for my liking, in the sense that I think a lot of the ideas they go over is very compacted, so it's more easily digestible. But at the time when I read this book, this is probably the first book I read by choice since I was, I want to say, probably around 10 or 11 years old. But I devoured this book. Out of nowhere, I was looking for decorations for my first place and I wanted a coffee table book, and I don't know why, but I stumbled upon this philosophy book. And Ryan Holiday talks a lot about stoicism, and Ryan Holiday's goal, I would say, is to take things like stoicism or deep-rooted philosophical ideas and cram them into digestible pages, in a sense that he'll take celebrities and famous people, he'll take very well-known people and influential people and take stories that he's learned about them, connect it to philosophy in a lot of ways. And it's funny looking back now at this, because this idea is going to tie into something I'm going to talk later in this video, but it opened my mind to ideas at the time that I had never thought about. It made me realize that there is so much more to the world than what is in your very small-minded community in typical senses, especially growing up in a smaller city around a lot of what I would call closed-minded people. It's not that the ideas were out of this world, but it just was not anything that I had heard before. It's not something that I had ever even opened my head to. And reading that first book put me on this deep dive of nonfiction reading. And at this point now, I've read pretty much a book a week for the last 3.5 years. I think in 2025, I did 53 books. The year before, I did 47. The year before was like 30. And I just keep working my way up. And at this point, I try to read a book a week. Right now, I'm finishing The Power of Now this week. I'm quite literally reading through the Bible right now. I'm going to do psych after. And one of my friends just bought me this book because they know how much I love reading. So I'll probably bring this on a trip because it's a shorter read. And I don't love carrying around giant books on planes and stuff. And those are my books for the month. If you look downstairs, there is walls and walls and walls of books, because reading truly changed my life. And there's so many things that I think people ignore when it comes to reading because they look at it as one thing or another. But I think they fail to realize that reading is your chance to talk to the smartest people in the world without needing to be in contact with them. And even if the books are written by an idiot, right? Like anybody you can think of. I've read a lot of books by people whose views I don't agree with or are genuinely bad people. But at the end of the day, what it does is it still opens your mind to different perspectives. So even if they're not the most educated person in the world, it still allows you to get a difference in view. And that perspective that you gain from reading about people and through other people's lenses is such an important tool when going through anything. And I'm just going to specifically kind of stick with business in this sense, but it's not just business because it all connects into one, which is another thing I'll be talking about soon. But that difference in perspective is what allows you to connect with anybody. That's what allows you to sell to anyone. That's what allows you to look at problems from different perspectives, because the more perspectives you can understand, the more open-minded and less biased that your opinions and choices will be throughout life. And that is life-changing. But on top of that, the difference in opinions will allow you to not only look at things with more criticism and take a view at the larger picture of things, but it opens your mind to be able to listen to things people are saying in the real world and understand when somebody's being manipulative or lying or is uneducated on a topic, because you're able to take in all this knowledge that you've learned and look at things with a more critical mindset. It's a huge thing. So when we're talking about running a business and you've read 50 books about different entrepreneurs and businesses and psychology, you're going to have a very different perspective than somebody that's just been running the same business for years and years and years and only running through the same ideas, not opening their mind to different things. Those people are not going to scale. Those people are not going to grow because they don't have the difference in perspective to understand how to do these things. Reading is quite literally talking to the dead. It is your communication to the afterlife, if that's how you want to put it. And that's a way that I love to look at it, because unfortunately, at this point, we're never going to be able to talk to Leonardo da Vinci. What we can do is read old entries from Leonardo da Vinci and take a look into his mind. And no, we're not going to understand his psyche by talking one-on-one, but we're pretty much speaking with the dead. When you read Marcus Aurelius, you're reading his journal. When you read Meditations, you are reading the journal of the most powerful man in the world. And something like that is truly being as close as possible as you can with who was the most powerful person in the world. And being able to see that perspective of a man that was that disciplined and that stoic and understand what he was thinking through those times, even just something like that allows you to truly look at what you're facing and realize that it's not that big in the grand scheme of things. And no, Marcus Aurelius can't mentor you, but it's almost like a mini mentorship when you read books like that. And that goes for everything. Psych, for instance, is a very thick book, obviously, 400-ish pages. This is a psychology book. This is a true psychology book. And although I'm not doing 6-7 months, and I'm not going to act like 6-7 months of going to do courses for psychology is going to match. Those things are obviously different, right? But I've studied psychology, and I would say a lot of the times when you're going through your own pace, you almost take in more reading when you're choosing to read, opposed to when you're in school and you're forced to. And I'm not saying obviously everyone has the choice to be in school or whatever, but what I'm trying to say is that you have to. When you're in that, you have to do it, right? When you're going through something leisurely and you're taking it in on your own, I think you adapt more because you want to be there. You want to be in that moment when you're reading. And I'm like I said, I'm not going to compare a 6-month course or a 6-month class to one book. But what I will say is it's like taking a mini course. And for $20 and 10 hours of your time, let's say, you just did a mini course, a mini class on psychology. And that's how it works with every book you read. And I kind of love the whole concept of jack of all trades, master of none, but oftentimes better than a master of one. And I always kind of clashes with my philosophy a bit, because I also believe in the quote, I fear the man who has practiced a kick 10,000 times more than a man who's practiced 10,000 kicks. Because you will never master something by doing a million things. But with that being said, having an understanding of a million things and being able to communicate with a million people because you know just a tad bit of a million things is probably the most powerful tool that you'll ever have. Because although I'm not a psychology professor and I'm not a genius in religion and I don't know everything about physics, I don't know everything about history, I know enough about all of these things to go and talk to anybody. And the thing is about being able to talk to anybody is that you can connect with anybody. And when you can connect with anybody, you have amazing opportunities, you have amazing networking opportunities. And if we're talking strictly from a business sense, the connections you're going to make from being able to talk to people because you have just enough base knowledge in the most niche thing that they love, whether that's having a weird understanding of the psychedelics in Peru and spiritual healing, or being able to talk about weird history that happened in Nazi Germany or some weird history that happened in Cambodia during the genocide, like stuff like this, right? Just little niche parts that you can pick apart. People have very different interests. So in my opinion, I would rather have a tiny little bit of information about all these niche topics and all this information about all these kind of random things than only know about one thing, which is business or music or something along those lines, because that's awesome and you can really, really connect with your people. But you are leaving the whole world open. There's a giant gap missing because you can only connect with people that understand the thing that you understand, which means you lack the perspective, you lack the growth, and you're no longer open minded. You're completely closed off to half the world. And that's another thing is it keeps you so curious reading, because when you pick up a 400-page book, most of the time I close a book and I'm not satisfied with what I know. So while you're reading a nonfiction book like Psych, a concept's going to come up. You're going to sit there for a second and you're going to go, what? This is crazy. This whole thing that I just read is crazy. I need to know more. And most of the time, because it's a shorter book, you're only kind of gonna get the tip of the iceberg with something like this. Depends on the book, of course, but you get the tip of the iceberg. So you will typically, what I do at least, is I go and research more about these things that I'm reading about, because I'm like, well, what does this lead to? What's the truth about this? What's the backstory behind this? Where does it lead? What's the grand picture of this, right? So it creates more curiosity in your day to day, because you start to ask questions more. You start to get this kid-like wonder again when you start to read constantly, because you're constantly thinking, well, what there's more to this. What is this about? What's behind this? So when I travel, when I'm out of my day to day and I see something that interests me, I'm curious. I ask questions. I want to know, because when I'm reading and I go to Google something, because I'm like, well, what's the story behind this? It's the same concept, right? But it works with everything. So you become a more curious mind, a more childlike wonder that brings you back to this scope of wanting to know everything and wanting to learn and wanting to grow. And the growth that you get from reading is unlike anything else, because the world of ideas that your brain is now open to is not going to happen in many other ways. The only thing I ever compare reading to in terms of learning knowledge and opening my mind is traveling the world. I traveled 33 countries, and sometimes I'll still gain more growth from reading a book than visiting a country. And I try not to read too much in countries. I like to read about countries I'm in while I'm there. I like to learn about the history while I'm there, because it makes it more interesting. It makes it more adaptive for me. But sometimes I've gone through countries. I've gone through the museums. I've gone through the country. I've talked to people. I've learned the food. I've learned the culture. And I come back and I read a book about that country. And I learned more in the book than I did there. And I do think that because I was there, it will give me more interest in it, because I've seen a lot of this stuff. So I might be taking away more from it and having a deeper understanding of it. But there's most definitely been times where I'll read after leaving a country and I learned so much more about the country. Like something like Cambodia. I learned about the genocides. I learned about, which most people don't know about. I'm not going to get into a loophole of the Cambodian genocides. But anyways, I learned about them and people talk about them, and you have an understanding while you're there that this happened and all this stuff. And you go to the prisons and you go to the camps and it's sad, and you go to the killing grounds and it's deep, it's hard, it hits. But when I read the book, And Then They Killed My Father, which is a book about a little girl living through the genocide from when the Khmer Rouge came in to the end, when they left and she ended up escaping the country, I learned so much more about what truly went on during that time than I think I learned there. And you feel it when you're in Cambodia. You truly do. Hearing that perspective, that diary, I was speaking to the dead. And what I learned from that and what I took away from that made Cambodia a much more special place for me, even 6 months after visiting it. And it helped me have a better understanding of how the people feel in that place. And I think the biggest thing that reading does, and it won't happen in the first book, it won't happen in the second book, it won't happen in the third book, it won't happen in the fourth book, it might not even happen until the 20th book. And it's not even something I truly understood until probably 2 full years into reading. But to this day, it is something that every single day of my life affects how I think. And that is what I have called, and there's probably a better name for it, so I do apologize, but I call it the concept of the web and the web inside your brain. And this is the idea that the dots connect the more you understand, and the more you understand, the dots connect, the more information you know. So, understanding one topic very well is amazing, and you'll be able to connect dots within that space. But something that I never really accounted on with reading or thought about necessarily until, like I said, not very long ago, is the idea of this web that goes through your brain. Because I had read probably 3 years ago, I had read a few finance books, originally kind of basic, like I Will Teach You How to Be Rich, and then stuff like The Richest Man in Babylon and The Psychology of Money, right? So certain things like this I read. And then probably a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, I read a few real estate books. And then I read a few banking books at some point. I read books on mortgages, or one book on mortgages. And then I've read many psychology books. I've read a very high mixture of things, but specifically the finance books, the psychology books, and then the business books. And this year I really deep dived into CEOs and autobiographies of CEOs like Shoe Dog and Steve Jobs and Elon Musk and all these things. Walter Isaacson is amazing. He's the best biographer that I've read. I read probably 5 biographies from him this year. I read a few musicians, and I read a lot of business books this year. I don't know why. I'll typically get into a 2-3 month period where I want to read like 10, 12 books on one kind of topic, one central idea. So I read a lot of biographies at one point, and then I read a lot of business books. And I read 4-Hour Workweek. So 4-Hour Workweek, a lot of the finance books I read years ago, a lot of the biographies on CEOs, and then a lot of business books I read this year came in. And one of the books is Blue Ocean Strategy, and it talks Blue Ocean Strategy. The concept of the book is trying to escape red markets, red water, right? That's where the sharks are eating. That's where they're fighting. And that's where the dog pit is in businesses, right? That's things like fast food, where everybody's fighting for a piece of the pie. Everybody is fighting for the money. Everyone's fighting for the clientele. That's video games. That's malls. That's clothing brands. That's shoes. That's Nike and Adidas. There are markets that are red, right? So Blue Ocean Strategy is finding blue water. It's finding water that's been untouched, and you're not fighting for your food there. You're just eating. There's no blood in the water, right? And that mixed with a lot of the CEO stuff and the 4-Hour Workweek stuff, which is about doing less for more, it really compounded in my head, trying to find this idea of what I can do to make a lot of money, right? Because money's not all that matters, but I don't want to work forever. And I want to work on things that matter to me. And the more time you put into stuff like my construction business, the less time you have to focus on things that truly matter to you and that are life-changing. So while I was buying my first property, this lovely condo, this lovely penthouse loft, anyways, it led me to this rabbit hole because of how difficult my mortgage was and how difficult it was to buy this home at my age and all the just hoops I had to jump through. And I'm not going to talk about my property tech idea right now because it's a lot. At one point, I probably will go on the internet and talk about this, but I had an idea for a truly billion-dollar business, and I'm planning on starting this seed investments for the business in the next 12 months and developing an app in the property tech space that I think can get acquired for hundreds of millions of dollars. And it's crazy because I literally felt like it's like I watched my mind paint a mental picture of this core concept from this book, 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 and my real life experience that I was living through right now. And there's another book I read, The Lean Startup is the book I read. And that mixed with the 4-Hour Workweek and Blue Ocean Strategy, all the finance books I've read in my past, all the marketing books that I've read, all the psychology that I've read, and everything else connected in my head. And I went, holy shit, this is the best business idea I've ever had. I've had a lot of business ideas, but I watched each individual concept from each book, conceptualize in my brain and problem solve. And it was, like I said, I've experienced this down the line, but it's only in the last year or so that I've truly realized how capable your mind is when you understand things to their core. And when you understand all these things, your brain connects dots. But I don't think that is something that happens. Obviously, that happens every single day. That happens all the time. But it can only happen when you digest so much information from so many different topics that all these things start to coincide with each other and helps your brain form these ideas that would not be possible otherwise. Because lived experience is awesome and it might allow you to react better in situations, but there's only so much knowledge you have about different concepts. You cannot do that without that. When I write music and when I want to scale businesses, when I need ideas for marketing, when I need ideas to see what I want to expand into and what I want to do, now that all of these things coincide in my head and create ideas for me pretty much passively, it is an unbelievable difference compared to when I didn't have this information. And that web inside your brain, that web between all of these ideas and all of these concepts is single-handedly the most important thing that I think you can get from reading, and reading a lot, but just taking in and truly digesting information. Because the second that happens where you've read enough different ideas and different concepts and different subjects that your brain can start to come up with literal billion-dollar business ideas simply because I was sitting there, had a problem, had a huge pain point, and my head connected all these dots and made me realize, oh, this is a problem. Here is the solution. And it's like I said, I'm not going to explain the property tech idea right now because I haven't patented yet, and it's also a very difficult concept to explain without getting very into the math and numbers of it. But it is the biggest problem-solving idea that I've ever had, and it will solve a problem for every single person that will ever buy a home. Or a property for that matter. Anybody that wants to sell a property or buy a property, every single person in the real estate market, every single person in the brokerage market, every single person that's working in real estate law, it is going to change the market completely. Because I recognized a million pain points and I realized these pain points are a problem that nobody is moving to solve. If I solve this problem, people will pay me a lot of money. Anyways, if you don't need to agree with everything I just said, but these are things that changed my life with reading on top of a million other things that I didn't mention. There's a plethora of things that you can take away from reading that I might not even know, right? I might have not taken away from reading yet. And that's the beauty of it, is the more you're going to learn, the more that you're going to take away from this stuff. I really hope that if you're watching this and you're somebody that needs a push, go pick up a book. Go pick up any book. And stuff is going to change your life. Anyways, guys, as I said in the beginning, my name is Carter Positan, and I am here on YouTube to be the person that I needed last year, yesterday, last month, 5 years ago. I want to guide people as best as I can and help people get out of the position they are in and grow to be the person that they can be. I don't care if you're 18. I don't care if you're 16. I don't care if you're 40. I don't care if you're 7 years old. If you want to grow, I am here to help. And I really hope that somebody somewhere took away something from this video. Anyways, guys, that is everything. And I will see you guys next week for another video.